So we begin a new teaching series entitled, What Would Jesus Say To? What would Jesus say? And we're going to kind of go through some well-known figures in our day, in our culture, or in our past, in our history, and kind of delve into some topics. And today is a topic that you're glad you came to church for. The topic is sex. Now you're all on the edge of your seat, right? You see, it's one of those topics that many times in church circles, we just don't talk about it. Don't say that word. But in reality, friend, God is the author of our sexuality. He is the one who gave us this gift that is to be experienced between two individuals in a loving, committed marital relationship, to experience something that is so amazingly intimate and beautiful. So what would Jesus say to Miley Cyrus? Now, Miley Cyrus, she's a 21-year-old young lady, incredibly popular. In fact, Times Magazine put her on the 100 most influential people on the earth. 21 years old. I mean, she hasn't lived very long, but there she is, already one of the most influential people in the world. In fact, only a couple of years ago, she was rated the #1 most wealthiest teenager in the world, making $125 million. 21 years old already, with an incredible amount of wealth. Miley Cyrus came on the scene best known as Hannah Montana. If you have young kids or you've watched the Disney Channel, you will know of Hannah Montana. Hannah Montana was a very pure character, very sparkly clean character. Unfortunately, Miley has switched her tone in the last little while, and she has become some sort of a sex symbol in our culture and is very provocative. Her latest musical compilation is The Wrecking Ball. And that name kind of says it all. She's sitting on a wrecking ball, not clothed, and it's a sign of the times. I mean, you cannot even watch commercials without sexuality being at the forefront. Many times I'll be watching a sports event on the television with my boys, and commercials will come on, and I literally have to tell them, "Let's look away," which is pretty sad. And you can't, social media, internet, I mean, the list goes on and on. We are in a sex-crazed world. But when you think of Miley Cyrus, this morning we don't pick up rocks and throw them at Miley Cyrus. We don't sit and scoff or judge or mock or ridicule. No, we don't do that because that's not what Jesus taught us to do. Jesus taught us to be people of grace, people of mercy, people of kindness, people of compassion. You see, Miley Cyrus is just a 21-year-old kid. She grew up in Tennessee on a farm. She grew up going to church every week. Her and her family attended a Southern Baptist church. She even got baptized in the church. She even went public with her faith in her early years of her career and said, "Jesus is my Savior. He is what gives me fulfillment." As a teenager, she made a commitment of wearing a purity ring, which meant she would hold that piece of her, that intimate piece, that sexuality piece in her life, until one day she would be married. What happened? What happened along the road? And I would want us to be the kind of people that would say to Miley, Jesus loves you. He's the answer to your life. He is what will fulfill you. He is what will give you all that you need to live a satisfying and full life. And so the question becomes, why is the world crazy about sex? What is it? What is the world, and why is the world crazy about sex? I would say this, first piece, is society says to do it. The question isn't so much nowadays whether you're doing it or not, it's how you're doing it, which is pretty scary. Tony Campolo, a well-known author and communicator, he said this: with sex education, we show them how to do it. Then we warn them not to do it, but we tell them if they decide to do it, to be careful, because it could kill them, make them sick, produce an unwanted child. Talk about confusion. It's true, isn't it? Maybe another reason why our world is crazy about sex is because people are craving love. Maybe people are craving love. We live in a very busy and fast-paced culture, and so children many times are growing up in homes where when they come from school, there's nobody home. They got the keys around their neck, and they're going in, and there might be a snack ready, or maybe even dinner ready, because mom and dad, they're trying to make ends meet, and they might not be home till 7. And so in many ways, they're growing up alone a lot of the times. And they're not getting that fill that they need from their dads. Young girls are not getting that affirmation and that affection from their father figures in their lives. And young men are not growing up with moms and dads that are validating them, that are showing them what it looks like to honor women. And so we have this culture that is hungry for love. And unfortunately, to fill that void in our hearts, we enter these relationships that are sexually charged in hopes of filling that void in our life. I think maybe another reason, and of course this list is not exhaustive, they're just some thoughts to consider this morning, is there's feelings of invulnerability as well in our culture. Feelings of invulnerability, this sense that I'm invincible, nothing bad can happen to me. I can live this sexually active life and nothing negative will happen to me because of it. But the reality is we're not invincible. The reality is thousands and thousands of people around the world live with ailments and health issues because of their sexual activity. People's lives have changed because of a child being birthed at a very young age. And if you're a single parent here, I want you to know this is a safe place for you. You're not going to find judgment here. You're not going to find ridicule here. You're going to find grace here. But it changes your life, doesn't it? Everything changes when we bring a child into the world. And so these are just some thoughts as it relates to why is the world so crazy about sex. And so I realize this morning that there might be those that are here that are single, those that have been divorced, those that are married, those that are widowed. And so I'm going to try my very best to talk about this subject that can help all of us here this morning. But sexuality and being single is not an easy thing in our day, is it? And I want to give you some thoughts as to why wait. Why wait and put on hold something that God created to be beautiful and intimate in the confines of a marriage between a husband and a wife in a loving, committed relationship. Why wait for that? Why hold that intimate spot of yourself for that person that you will one day commit the rest of your life loving and caring and doing life with? Why wait? There's a few reasons why we should wait. One of them is physical reasons. Physical reasons for waiting. Listen, there are all kinds of negative ramifications to living sexually active prior to marriage, having multiple partners. There are ailments. There are unwanted children at a young age, and every child's a gift of the Lord. But it creates all sorts of challenges. So there's physical reasons, but there's also emotional reasons for waiting. You see, God created sexual intimacy to serve as a total expression of the lifelong love commitment between a man and a woman. Take away the lifelong part, the commitment part, or the love part, and sex becomes empty and cheap. There is an emotional piece to our sexuality. It's not just an act. It's not just two bodies coming together. It's two people coming together. Many times the motto has been stated in our culture, like you've got to test drive the car before you commit to buying it. Have you heard that before? Well, listen, people are not cars. Cars don't feel bad when you don't buy them. People have emotions. We're made out of heart, flesh. That means we hurt sometimes. We We get wounded sometimes. And I am afraid that part of the reason why, like never before, so many struggle with depression, anxieties, and fears, it could be hinged on our sexual activities because we've given something that's so intimate away, and then it just breaks apart. And it happens multiple times potentially. Friends, that will have emotional ramifications. Don't underestimate the power of those encounters. And so there are emotional reasons why we should wait. Thirdly, there are relational reasons why we should wait. You see, when you become sexually active, it becomes the main course in the relationship. Counseled young couples in this, young unmarried couples. It's amazing how when a couple decides to be sexually active prior to marriage, what can happen in those relationships is our sexuality becomes the main meal of the day. We stop talking. You stop doing the fun things you used to do because you get too preoccupied by that sexual piece. And many times when sexuality begins in relationships, the relationship starts walking out the door. It becomes the main course of the relationship. There are relational reasons why you should wait. Now, I also want to say this. I've sat down with married couples that because maybe one of the spouses had a history of sexual activity, that it has now become a problem in their marriage. Why? Because there's comparisons that now can be made as it relates to performance. There could be memories and flashbacks that hinder our thought lives in our marriages. Friends, there's ripple effects to this. So there are relational reasons to wait. And there are also spiritual reasons to wait. You see, we need to realize that while God is pro-sex, he's anti-sin. Did you hear me? As much as God is pro-sex, he's anti-sin. Biblically, and we can go through all the biblical passages this morning, but he speaks about sexual immorality, which is sexual experiences outside of that marital relationship, that committed husband and wife marital relationship. When it gets taken out from there, we go beyond the ways of the Lord. And it's not because God doesn't want to give you pleasure. It's not because God is a killjoy and he's boring and he doesn't want you to have an exciting life. It's not that at all. It's actually the opposite. He wants you to have that. But he says, if you really want that, you got to put some guidelines, some fences around your life. And if you do it my way, you're going to experience true intimacy and pleasure in a beautiful way. Don't believe what the culture tells you. Stats say that relationships that are sexually active prior to marriage actually have a higher chance of divorce. That another stat says that sex lives are most vibrant in married couples' lives, in committed relationships. That married people are the more satisfied sexually than single people are cohabiting. That's the truth. That's what the stats say. So don't believe what's out there that says you got to test drive because you got to make sure. No, actually, if you wait and you keep it for that private kingdom of a husband and a wife, you will experience true fulfillment and satisfaction because you're doing it God's way. And so because God loves us so much, he doesn't want us to have emotional pain. He doesn't want us to experience physical ailments. He doesn't want us to carry relational baggage into our marriages. So he says, keep that part pure. Keep it reserved for one day when you commit your life to another person for the rest of your life. And so there are spiritual reasons. Friends, you will reap what you sow. Reap what is good as a single person. Make good choices today so you can reap the benefits tomorrow. What does Jesus say specifically in terms of the biblical passages related to this topic? What does Jesus say about sexual sin? Matthew 5, starting at verse 27. It's the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5, starting at verse 27. And Jesus says this, "You have heard that it was said, 'Do not commit adultery.'" That's what the Older Testament taught. Do not commit adultery. "But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. What's Jesus saying here? He's saying your sexuality is important. How you steward your sexuality is really important. How you manage that part of your life is important. So he says, don't flirt with it. Don't put yourself in vulnerable situations where temptation will pounce all over you. You got to deal with it seriously. And so he says, you've heard that in the past it was told you that adultery is bad. Don't do it. But I tell you, it starts with your mind. It starts with your heart. It starts with what you think about, what you read, what you expose yourself to. That's where it starts. You see, friends, people don't wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to cheat on my spouse. It doesn't work that way. It's a progression. It's thought after thought, conversation after conversation. You push the boundary, Next thing you know, you make a big mistake. And some of you, and I understand that this is heart-wrenching, for some of us, you've experienced the heartache of this kind of betrayal. But God would want you to know today that it ain't over. That our God is the God who brings healing, who brings reconciliation, who brings wholeness, who brings forgiveness, who brings grace, who brings mercy. And you might be a single person here thinking, boy, I wish I could go back, but I've made some bad decisions. And I regret them. And I'm dealing with some of those ramifications. Listen, friend, it's not over. It's not over. You see, God's grace is enough for you as well. He can cover you and make you white as snow. You can change your activity and your choices today. You can leave what is in the past and move on to the future. I've even sat down with couples in premarital counseling, and I know that they're cohabiting. And I purposely connected them because I want to invest in their life because I care for them. And in conversation, sexuality comes in. And we talk about it honestly and authentically. And I give them full rein. They can be totally honest. They're not going to get judgment from me. But they're going to get truth from me. And I've had couples come to me, young couples, and they say to me, you know what? After what you've said, I think we're going to make a commitment till the day we get married to keep that pure. We can't go back and change what's already been done. And it's going to be difficult to not bring the boundary way up. But we're going to do that because we want to begin to honor God with our lives. I think that's a beautiful thing. There is always redemption with Jesus. There is always a second and third chance with Jesus. And so to see couples make those good decisions. And so you might be here and you're in a relationship and you know it's not healthy. It doesn't have to stay unhealthy forever. You can make some decisions. You might have to break it off. I don't know. You got to both be on the same page, though. And when you do it God's way, He will honor that. You will reap the benefits of doing it God's way. Trust me. You will reap the benefits. And so Jesus says, take that part of your life, that sexuality part, seriously. If it's making you sin, cut it off. Do whatever it takes. And He's not talking about self-mutilation here. Yeah, that didn't sound very good. This topic is just one of those. You got to be really careful, right? But what He's saying is take it seriously. Don't joke around because the wages of sin is death. That's what you'll get paid out. And so, make wise decisions. Later on in John chapter 4, I want you to go there. Jesus speaks. How does Jesus respond to those that are struggling with their sexuality? What does He do? What does He say? How does He speak to them? Well, it was a hot day, and there was a woman. She was a Samaritan woman. And she was out getting some water out of the well. And Samaritans didn't communicate with Jewish people. It just didn't happen. And on top of that, Jesus being Jewish and this woman being Samaritan, he was a man, she was a woman. He shouldn't have talked to her. But Jesus transcends and transforms culture. He wants to transform her. He wants to transform this situation. So he's walking by. He sees this Samaritan woman getting some water out of a well, and he speaks to her. And he asks her to get him a drink if she didn't mind. When the Samaritan woman, starting in verse 7, came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" Verse 9, the Samaritan woman said to him, "You're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." But because Jesus knows everything, he knew her story. He knew what was going on in her world. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." I would have given you living water. So now he's talking in a spiritual sense. Stay with me. Watch what happens. "Sir," the woman said, "you've nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his flocks and herds?" And Jesus answered her and said this, "Everyone who drinks this water, this physical water that you see here, will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst again. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water, welling up to eternal life." So what's he saying? He's saying the water that I offer will quench the need in your heart. If you drink from my water, if you come to me, you will be fully satisfied. And it's only I that can offer you that. Nobody else can offer you that. Why is he talking like this to this lady? He knows her story. Watch what happens. The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." She's not getting it yet, right? Then he told her this. This is where it all connects the dots. Jesus connects the dots for her. "Go call your husband and come back." It's a loaded question. Jesus knows her story. "Go call your husband and come back." She says to him, "I don't have a husband." Okay? I don't have a husband. Jesus says to her then, "You're right when you say you don't have a husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands. And the man you now have is not even your husband. What you have just said is quite true." What is Jesus saying here? He's saying to this lady that, I know you've had a lot of failed marriages. And if you're sitting here and you're divorced, I want you to know that there is life after divorce. That God wants to minister to you in a most beautiful way, just like he did to this lady that day. If Jesus was religious, he wouldn't have even talked to this lady. He would have known her story and judged her, but that's not what Jesus does. He engages with her and says, "I know your story. I know you've got multiple failed marriages. In fact, the relationship you're now in is not even a marital relationship, but I want you to know. I want you to experience something that I can offer that no man can offer you. Something that can fulfill that void that you're so badly trying to fill with human relationship. But I want you to know you can have that fulfillment in me. You can drink a water that's living. And if you drink from this stream, it'll be like a fountain that flows out of you that'll enable you to live a fully satisfying life." You see, the heart of Christ. And so I don't know your history. I don't know your story. But I do know this, that Jesus knows your story. And he's right here, and he's not rejecting you. He's not shunning you. He's not throwing shame at you. But he's offering you living water. He's offering you something that nobody else can offer you, that will fill that emptiness in your heart that you've so desperately been trying to fill. That's the heart of Christ. Later on, in a few more chapters later, something else happens in John chapter 8. It gives us another hint as to how Jesus would approach us if we're challenged sexually and we're going through some difficulty, whether in the past, the present. It's at dawn, and he appeared, and he appeared again in the temple courts, John 8, verse 2, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. And the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, so the religious folks, what did they do? They brought in a woman who was caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" Setting Jesus up. They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus, he bent down and he started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and he said to them, "If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." You bring the woman here, eh, guys? Where's the man? You're ready to condemn this lady, but what about your own lives? Look in the mirror. You see anything in there that maybe needs some fixing? Maybe needs some forgiveness? Again, he stooped down and he wrote on the ground, and at this, those who heard began to go away at one at a time. They started to go away one at a time. The older ones first. What I find, the older I get, the more I realize I need his grace. The more I realize I need his mercy. Until only Jesus was left with this woman. It's a powerful moment, isn't it? "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "Then neither do I condemn you," he said. "Go now and leave your life of sin." What a transformational moment. I don't know your story. For this lady, she obviously had made some bad decisions in her life. And I'm sure she was feeling the shame of it all, especially being embarrassed and brought before Jesus in that kind of fashion. I want you to know that Jesus doesn't stand here with rocks ready to bury you because of your sin. But he's here to say, "I don't condemn you. Now go and sin no more." You see, Jesus loves you just the way you are. He doesn't say, "Fix your life, then come to me." He'll take you with all of the stuff. But he loves you too much to keep you that way. He will do whatever it takes to help you get back on the road of recovery. So he says to this woman, "I don't condemn you, lady. My dear daughter, I don't condemn you. You're not going to find judgment coming from me. You're only going to find grace and mercy. But listen, I've got so much more for you. I have such a greater life ahead of you. Leave that kind of life of sin. It's all a facade. It doesn't bring fulfillment. It actually leaves you more empty than you started. Follow me. Leave the life of sin behind." That's what Jesus says to us. And so if you're single and you're trying to kind of balance this, or you're married and you got some stuff going on in your heart that you know isn't pleasing to God, you can make it right with Christ today. The past doesn't need to be your present and your future forever. You can leave it behind and move forward. You've got a Jesus today who's gracious, and you've got a church that doesn't kind of stand in judgment of you. You've got a church where you can be safe and honest and transparent and get help when you need it. Okay. Apostle Paul says, "Flee from sexual immorality." The picture of that is of a person running out of a burning building. Don't flirt with it. Don't think, "I can handle this." It'll burn you down. Trust me. Run, flee, run out of it like it's a burning building. Don't think you can handle it. The moment you think you can handle it, you fall flat on your face. That's why I have certain things in my life that are standard. I do not meet with the opposite sex off-site in some coffee shop. I just don't do that. because I don't want to put myself in a vulnerable position. And that's why we have an office here where you can come and there's staff around, and because it's safer that way. It's better that way. I have accountability. My wife is my greatest accountability partner. She asks me hard questions along the way. It's a safe relationship where I can be honest. I got some other guys in my life, other pastors, that we make sure we keep each other accountable. We meet and pray for each other, and we can be honest there. And because we're made out of the same stuff as you. So we battle the same stuff, but we battle it. And with God's help, we live victoriously. Forgetting what is behind, straining forward to what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. And so you're single. Can't change the past, but you can move forward into the future. My prayer is that God will give you everything you need. Don't get caught up with the cultural trends. Get caught up with God's way. All right, sex and marriage. I love talking to young men, and they say to me, you know, I all my problems will be solved related to my sexuality and lust once I get married. That's all I need is to get married. And all the married guys go, brother, let's go for a walk. I'll teach you a few things. It doesn't go away, right, married guys? Okay, I'm the only one. All the guys are like, don't keep your head down. Don't look at him today. And we all deal with temptation, right? We all deal with it. So whether we're married or single, it's going to be there. In fact, sometimes when we get married, it might actually get worse in some cases. So what does God say? Sex and marriage. Well, first of all, the author of sex. God is the author of this thing we call sex. It's not a dirty word. It's actually a gift given to us by the Lord for a man and a woman in a marital relationship to experience in a most beautiful way. It's to be pleasurable. It's to enjoy. In fact, can I read you Proverbs 5:18 and 19? Do you want to blush today? You're going to blush. You ready? I could go to Song of Songs. Then we would all be blushing for real. There's a whole book there, Song of Songs. You might want to read it on your own time. But it's all about sex and lovemaking. And so we here at Heartland, we preach all of this, not just part of it, even the parts that make us blush. So Proverbs 5:18, 19. You ready? Okay. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be captivated by her love. You see, you have permission to enjoy sex within your marriage. Did you hear me? You have permission by God to enjoy this beautiful gift that the Lord has given to us between a husband and a wife in a committed, lifelong relationship. It's a beautiful thing. And it's not just for a year, but it says to grow old together and enjoy it because I've blessed you with it. He's the author. We have tarnished it and made it a bunch of other things. Yes. But when we do it God's way, there's nothing like it. It's a wonderful thing. Number 2, the unity of sex. Paul in Ephesians 5:31 and 32 says this. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. The two will become one. This is a profound mystery, Paul says. But I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself. Another portion says, husbands should love their wives as Christ loved the church. Whoa! You got to give your life up. Love your wives. Honor them. Respect them. Speaking of respect, it then says, and the wife must respect her husband. When the husband loves his wife and the wife respects the husband, that's a beautiful thing. The two become one. But marriage really is an object lesson of our relationship with God, right? God says, I want to have an intimate relationship with you, Joel. I want to know you inside out. You can talk to me about anything. You can go to my scriptures and I will speak to you powerful words that'll transform your life. We can have an intimate relationship with you, with each other. But I want you to also see what intimacy is by giving you an opportunity to have a human relationship between a husband and a wife. You're going to learn what intimacy is. I've given you this object lesson to resemble my relationship with you, where the two become one. When the two become one, and as time goes, the one becomes two again, we kind of go our separate ways. We start to drift from each other. One of the first things that goes in a marital relationship is what? Intimacy or sexuality. Because why would I want to be intimate if we're not one? If there's no love, if there's no respect. See that? Couples could live in the same home but live completely separate lives. And it's tragic, and some of you know what I'm talking about. But even there, it's not over because God is still in the mix. I'm going to get to that in a second. So the unity of sex, and finally the environment of sex, and it's what I was kind of referring to already. Agape love is always the fertile soil for God-planned pleasure in the physical marriage relationship. Agape love, a love that is unconditional. That's what kind of creates the environment for intimacy to happen. You take love out of the marriage, how's intimacy ever going to happen? Because sexuality is way more than just two bodies coming together. It's two people coming together. And if there's no love and respect, how can those two people come together and enjoy something that's supposed to be so intimate? So God wants that two becoming one to be so paramount in a marital relationship. So that out of that environment, out of that love and out of that respect, and when couples are being kind and compassionate and giving and generous to each other, that sexuality piece just becomes amazing. It's off the chart because it's fertile soil for it to happen. Right? But you take that fertile soil out, you take the agape love out, that intimacy piece isn't there. You see, I realize that our marriage is kind of like a private kingdom. Follow me with this analogy this morning. Marriage is like a private kingdom. Marriage is a kingdom where you and your spouse, your marriage partner, dwell with the King, Jesus Christ. I always tell young couples this, and in some of my marriage ceremonies, I say this. It takes three to make a marriage work: the husband, the wife, and God. That's the private kingdom. We bring Jesus into the mix. It's the private kingdom between a husband and a wife and Jesus. That's what creates the oneness. That's what keeps the oneness. That's what keeps the two becoming one, is Jesus. But the oneness in our day is being attacked. Everything in our world wants to separate that oneness. What are those attacks look like? Well, there can be invasions. What is an invasion on our oneness in our marriages? An invasion is something that happens that attacks our marriage. It could be an economic downturn. It can be a financial situation that really has created all kinds of stress in your marriage. And that thing, whatever it is trying to invade the oneness of your marriage. So, married couples, be on the lookout for invasions. Don't allow those circumstances to invade the oneness of your marriage. Another attack on our marriages is intrusion. What does intrusion mean? Intrusion is individuals in our sphere of life that try to intrude our marriages. These are individuals that try to innocently make one of the spouses think that they're separate from their spouse. It could be a mother-in-law. Mom, I love you. You're watching the live stream. Have a great mother-in-law. But it could be our in-law relationships. It could be one of the spouse. It could be a husband that has never left his parents. He still does what his parents say, even if his wife doesn't agree. That could create intrusion into the marriage. There is a breach in the marriage when that happens. It could be a wife who's got some friends in her life that are always badgering her about, make sure you get this, make sure he does this, make sure, and it's that thought of, you're not one, you're two. Fight for your rights. That's an intrusion in a oneness marital relationship. Look for the intrusions, friends. Don't be naive to them. You leave your mom and dad, and you start a new family. Make that a private kingdom. That doesn't mean you don't get advice, but at the end of the day, you make the decision as a couple. Third area of attack is infiltration. Now, what's that? I had to get them all to start with an I, so. Infiltration is when things happen in our marriage, and they happen in every marriage. Disagreements, circumstances, arguments, words that are spoken out of anger, and we wound each other as husband and wife. We say things, do things that deeply wound each other. When those things happen, if we harbor them in our heart and we allow bitterness and resentment and anger and hatred and unforgiveness, it will infiltrate that oneness in that marriage and destroy it. It will destroy the oneness. So as a husband, I need to guard my heart. I need to be able to be honest with my wife when she does something that hurts me. And she needs to be honest with me to tell me the same thing. Together we find reconciliation. You know, one of the rules in our home is, even in the mid, and we don't have many of these, but we have arguments. Don't believe couples that say we never argue. Baloney. It's how you argue that matters, right? Respecting one another and hearing each other out. And so one of the rules in our home is we never threaten to leave. That is just not an option in our marriage. We don't use threats because that'll create all kinds of infiltration and throw everything off. The two have become one, and we're going to stick this thing through. I'm going to love my wife. She's going to respect me. We're going to make sure that cycle is healthy, even through the difficulties of a marriage. These are attacks on the oneness of this private kingdom we call marriage. So what are the components of a healthy kingdom, you might ask? 3 statements I make today. Security. It's important that our kingdoms have security there. We need to have security in our marriages. And security begins with communication. The reason why security and communication go hand in hand is because security comes where a husband and a wife can be totally honest with their perspectives, their ideologies, their thoughts, their advice, and not feel like if they share their opinion, they're going to be mocked, they're going to be ridiculed, they're going to be judged. They might even see somebody's temper if they share what they really think. that creates a lack of security. Security is when a husband and a wife can talk. They can share really what their thoughts are. They can share thoughts without really making a conclusion yet. That it's a safe enough environment to just speak your mind and feel like you can do that because they're going to listen to you. They're going to value you. They might not always agree with you, but it's going to be the kind of environment that's secure. It's safe here to talk. You don't have to be afraid to share your opinion and I flip off my handle with a temper. Or I might throw a few objects around the house. That's not security. Security is when you can be honest, vulnerable, transparent, truthful, and not feel scared for doing it. Security is a key factor to a healthy kingdom. Secondly, stability. You need stability in a private kingdom. So we might say, well, how do we get stability? Listen, friends, it's not a patriarchy where husbands rule as a dictator. You're not going to find security in that. But you're also not going to find stability and security in a matriarchy where the wife rules as an awesome power behind the throne. I've been practicing that one. It's not that either. That doesn't create stability. And it's not an anarchy either, where nobody knows who's in charge. You know it's an anarchy when the kids get to be in charge. So it's not a patriarchy, it's not a matriarchy, and it's not an anarchy, it's a theocracy. What is that? A theocracy is when God rules in our marriage. Okay, so what does that look like? This is what it looks like. When our marriages are theocracies, it looks like this. It's fathers and husbands that are going into the scriptures and reading about what it means to be a loving husband and a caring father and a man of integrity and a man of character. And ongoing, that husband desiring the ways of the Lord in their life and understanding what it means to love their wives as Christ loved the church. And that's what it looks like for a husband, understand what a theocracy looks like. Similarly, it's a wife who says, God, I want to be the best wife. I want to be an amazing spouse to my husband. I want to be nurturing. I want to be supportive. I want to be all that you've called me to be as an individual. I want to be a woman of purity and a hardworking lady who makes a difference not only in my husband's life, but in my kids and in my community. And God, help me. That's a theocracy where we've said, God, we need you to be the king of our marriage. I need your help as a husband and as a dad. My wife needs help from you as a spouse and as a mom. We're all going to God to say, God, I need you. It's not a patriarchy where men dictate their way through, and it's not a matriarchy where women rule behind the throne. It's not an anarchy where kids have no control, but it's a theocracy where God is the center of our families. Thirdly, serenity is really important in a healthy kingdom. Serenity flows from harmony of beliefs, a oneness of goals, mutual participation in all that is most important in the man and the wife. So you're dreaming together. You're trying to figure out, what do we really value? What is our family going to look like? And this is tough because if the oneness gets broken early on in the marriage, you're trying to catch up. But listen, do whatever it takes to get the oneness back in your marriage. If it means getting a counselor, get a counselor. If it means working on your own heart and your own condition, get that done. God brought you together not to be miserable for the rest of your life. He brought you together for a reason. For a reason. Okay. I conclude with this. If the worship team could come on up. We made it through the sex talk. Man, sometimes I come up with these themes and then the week of or 2 I have to prepare and I'm like, what did I do to myself? But I've heard this said many times, and I'm happy I can give an answer to this. I've heard couples tell me, I wish we can start all over. I wish we can start all over. The reality is you can start all over. I'm serious. I have seen couples that, yes, they are married, but they live in opposite ends of the world, relationally. They're so far from each other. And I've seen God, in only God fashion, bring them back to reconciliation. I've seen it. Only God can do that. But if you want him to do that, and if you're honestly coming to God with that desire, and almost a brokenness in your heart to say, God, there's things I need to work on. Rather than focusing on my spouse and all that they need to work on. God, I need to own what I can own. And if both spouses go to that place and say, you know what, we don't need to live the next 30 years like this. We can change this if we let God into our kingdom again. So the question, or the phrase, I wish we could start it again, you can start it again. Trust me. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a whole lot of work. So don't pretend it's easy. It's not easy. It's never easy. Nothing worth doing comes easy. It's going to take conversation after conversation. It's going to take working through a lot of pain and woundedness of the past. But it's worth it. It's worth it. And God will be your helper through it all. For the single person, I wish I could change that. You can't, right? You can't go back and undo decisions that you've made. But you can live differently starting today. You can say, you know what? That intimacy piece, I think he's onto something about searching for that affection and that affirmation. Maybe you feel like a little bit about like that Samaritan woman, looking and searching for that fulfillment. And Jesus says, I got the living water for you. I've got it for you. Start drinking from the living water today. God's grace is enough. It's never too late.